You know that feeling, right? You've spent years in a classroom.
Oh, yeah.
You've memorized all the conjugation tables. You know the exact difference between the past perfect and the past continuous.
You've passed all the written tests.
Exactly. You've passed the tests. But then you're on vacation, or maybe you're sitting in a high-stakes business meeting, and someone asks you a completely simple question in English. And
It
you just
freeze.
you just completely freeze up.
It is the dreaded blue screen of death for language learners.
That is the perfect way to describe it. It's like your brain completely crashes. I mean, you know the rules, but you absolutely cannot find the words.
And it's incredibly frustrating.
It really is. And honestly, looking at the data we have for today's deep dive, it seems to be this universal experience for, well, almost everyone who tries to learn a language in a traditional school setting.
It is definitely universal, but the good news is that it's not inevitable. That frustration you're talking about, it usually comes from a conflict between two completely different systems in your brain. And that conflict is exactly what we are unpacking today.
Because we have a massive stack of research here on the desk. We're looking at everything from Stephen Krashen's foundational theories on how the brain acquires language, all the way to modern, on-the-ground strategies from polyglots like Luca Lampariello and A.J. Hoagie.
And we're going to get very specific with this material. This isn't just a list of quick tips and tricks.
No, definitely not.
This is a deep dive into the actual science of learning English, specifically the science and strategy of clarity and pace.
Our mission today is really to understand why we freeze up, and more importantly, how you can move from that frantic, anxious translation mode into a clear, paused, and deliberate flow.
We want to help you move from simply decoding the language to actually living in it.
And to do that, I think we have to start with what might be the most important distinction in our entire research stack.
Yes, the big one.
It's the fundamental difference between learning and acquisition. I have to admit, before I started digging into this material, I really thought those were just synonyms.
Most people do.
I mean, if I'm learning English, aren't I acquiring it?
In casual conversation, sure, you can use them interchangeably. But scientifically, no. They're totally different processes. Stephen Krashen argues that learning is what happens in a typical classroom.
Okay.
It is conscious, it is explicit. You are essentially learning about the language.
Like memorizing rules.
Exactly. You are dissecting grammar structures. It's a lot like reading a manual on how a car engine works.
Okay, so learning is knowing that you have to add an ed to make a regular verb past tense.
Yes. But acquisition, on the other hand, is subconscious. It's what happens naturally when a child learns their very first language.
Because a toddler definitely isn't studying grammar rules.
Right. They're just picking up patterns from their environment. When you acquire a language, you don't think about the rule before you speak. You just have a feel for correctness.
It just sounds right or it sounds wrong.
Exactly. So going back to your car analogy,
Yeah.
learning is reading the manual, but acquisition is actually driving the car without constantly looking down at your feet to figure out which pedal is which.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy. And so the reason people freeze up that blue screen of death we mentioned is that because they are trying to drive the car by actively reading the manual in real time.
That is precisely it. They are trying to use what Krashen calls their conscious monitor to construct sentences rule by rule, instead of just relying on subconscious acquisition.
It's too much mental load.
Way too much.
So basically, the mission of this deep dive is figuring out how to shut down that manual reading part of the brain and turn on the driving part.
We need to bypass the monitor.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? Because the standard advice you hear everywhere is usually just speak more.
Right. Force yourself to talk.
Yeah, if you want to get better at speaking, you have to force yourself to speak from day one.
You would certainly think so. But that is actually the biggest myth our sources bust today. Yes. According to the input hypothesis, which is Krashen's absolute core theory speaking does not cause language acquisition.
Wait, hold on a second. That sounds completely backwards to everything we've been taught. You're saying practice doesn't make perfect?
Well, in the context of language acquisition, speaking is the result of learning. It is not the cause.
That is a massive shift in perspective.
It really is. You acquire language in one way and one way only, and that is when you understand messages.
When you consume what the research calls comprehensible input.
Exactly. Comprehensible input.
So just listening and reading.
Exclusively listening and reading. If you force yourself to speak before you've built up enough of that mental input, you aren't really acquiring anything new.
What are you doing then?
You are just desperately translating from your native language using those rigid grammar rules you memorized.
Oh, right. Driving by the manual.
And doing that just stresses you out. Plus, you're highly likely to cement bad habits.
Okay, this leads us right to that mathematical formula Krashen is so famous for. It looks a bit like algebra in the source material, but let's unpack it for the listener. It's simply I plus 1.
Think of it as the Goldilocks zone of learning.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. The I represents your current level of competence. It's everything you understand perfectly right now.
Okay, got it.
The +1 is the new material, maybe vocabulary or a grammar structure, that is just a tiny bit beyond your current reach.
So it's not a massive leap, it's literally just one step up.
Right. If you listen to a podcast that is I plus 0, you aren't learning anything new. It's too easy.
You're just reviewing.
Yes. But if you turn on a university lecture about quantum physics, that might be I plus 10.
And that's just noise.
Complete noise.
Yeah.
Your brain cannot latch onto anything.
Because you need the context of the stuff you actually do know to figure out the +1.
Exactly. We acquire language when we understand the core message despite the new words, because the surrounding context fills in the gaps for us.
But how do we measure that in the real world? I mean, practically speaking, how does the listener know if a podcast or a book is I plus 1 or I plus 10?
Do they need to sit there and count the words?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we actually have some fascinating hard data on this.
From the DEV community and Jane Birkenhead sources, right?
Yes, they put a very specific number on it. To read a text with adequate comprehension.
Meaning you aren't frustrated and throwing the book across the room?
Right, meaning you aren't reaching for a dictionary every 10 seconds. To do that, you need to know approximately 95% of the words in the text.
95%. That sounds incredibly high.
It surprises a lot of people.
I feel like if I know 80% of the words on a page, I'm doing pretty well.
You might feel like you're doing well, but the research shows that at 80%, your actual comprehension drops significantly.
Wow.
It stops being input and starts becoming a logic puzzle. You end up spending so much mental energy just decoding the unknown words that you completely miss the flow and the overall meaning.
You know, that completely explains why so many people, myself included, just burn out when we try to read novels in a new language.
It's a very common trap.
You pick up something like Harry Potter, thinking, oh, it's a kid's book, so it must be easy. But if you're looking up 5 or 6 words on every single page...
It's not reading anymore.
Yeah.
It's deciphering. And deciphering kills the joy, which in turn kills the acquisition.
Right.
You absolutely need that 95% coverage so that the remaining 5% can just be absorbed naturally from the context.
That makes so much sense. Now, there's another layer to this input theory that I found really reassuring, especially for anyone listening who feels like they're just naturally bad at grammar.
The natural order hypothesis.
Yes. This is a huge relief for perfectionists.
It really is. The research shows that there is a predictable biological order in which our brains acquire grammar rules.
And it has almost nothing to do with the order they are taught in textbooks.
None at all.
Give us an example of how that works.
Okay, take the ing ending in English, like I am playing or she is eating.
Right.
Learners tend to acquire this structure very early on. It just sticks.
Oh.
But the third person singular, like he walks, she runs,
Yo.
that is acquired very, very late in the process.
That is so incredibly true. I have friends who are highly fluent in English. They've lived here for years, but they still occasionally say, he'd go to the store.
And according to the linguistic research, that is completely natural.
It's not a failure.
Not at all. The key insight here is that you cannot force your brain to acquire a rule before it's biologically ready.
No matter how many textbook drills you do.
Exactly. Teachers can teach it. You can memorize the rule for a test. But until you've had enough comprehensible input, enough sheer exposure, your brain simply won't subconsciously click that specific rule into place.
Oh, so if you're making that mistake, it's not because you're stupid or lazy. It's just because you haven't hit the data threshold for that specific rule yet.
Precisely. Your brain just isn't ready for that particular +1 yet.
Okay, so if input is the key to everything, let's talk strategy. How do we actually consume this input effectively? Do we read like a detective, analyzing every single sentence? Or do we read like we're on the beach, just letting the words wash over us?
This is a great debate in the language community. And the answer, according to the polyglot Luca Lampariello, is that you actually need both.
Both.
Yes. But you have to treat them as completely separate, distinct activities. He categorizes them as intensive reading and extensive reading.
I really love the labels he uses for these in the source material. He calls intensive reading the detective.
The detective, right. This mode is for very short, dense texts, maybe just 1 or 2 pages at most.
Okay.
Here, you are pulling out the microscope. You are looking up every single unknown word. You are actively analyzing why the author used that specific tense.
You are squeezing the text for every drop of information.
Squeezing it dry. You are dissecting it. And this is highly valuable because it builds your toolbox. It shows you the mechanics of how the language engine works.
But, and I imagine this is a big but.
It is a huge but. It is utterly exhausting. You cannot read like a detective for an hour straight.
Which is where the flow comes in.
Exactly. Extensive reading, the flow. This is the marathon approach. In this mode, you read large amounts of material that is at, or honestly even slightly below, your current level.
And the absolute golden rule here is...
Do not touch the dictionary.
See, that is so hard to do. It feels like cheating.
I know.
Or like I'm being lazy if I just skip right past a word. I don't know.
It definitely feels counterintuitive at first, but you really have to trust the process.
Yeah.
If you stop to look up a word, you instantly break the flow.
You snap out of it.
You switch your brain right back into learning mode, back to reading the manual. Extensive reading is about seeing the words you already know over and over again in dozens of different contexts.
And that repetition is what moves them from short-term memory into deep, long-term acquisition.
Exactly right.
So to summarize Lampariello's strategy, intensive reading gives you the tools, but extensive reading actually teaches you how to use them effortlessly.
You need the detective to understand the mechanics, but you absolutely need the flow to learn how to enjoy the drive.
Okay, so let's say we've flooded the brain with input. We're reading, we're listening, we're respecting the natural order of things. But eventually, we do have to open our mouths.
Yes, eventually.
How do we actually bridge that gap from passive understanding to active, clear speaking? Because our focus here is getting to that clear, paused, deliberate conversation.
This brings us to a concept that parents know very well, but adult learners almost always ignore.
And what's that?
The silent period.
The silent period, it sounds almost meditative.
It is, in a way.
Yeah.
Just think about a baby. They listen for a full year, sometimes even 2 years, before they ever start producing actual sentences.
They're just gathering data.
Absorbing massive amounts of data. And adult beginners often need a very similar phase. The research strongly suggests that forcing production too early is actually counterproductive.
But we live in this culture that constantly praises output. I mean, speak from day one is a huge marketing slogan in the language learning community.
It is a massive slogan. But if you speak from day one, what are you actually doing?
Right.
You simply don't have enough English data in your brain yet. So you have to rely entirely on your native language's structure and just awkwardly plug in English words.
You aren't really speaking English, you're speaking, say, English-coded Spanish or French.
Exactly. And once you start doing that, it becomes a habit that is incredibly hard to break. You create a deep dependency on mental translation.
So once we have waited, once we have respected that silent period and built up our input pool, how do we actually start speaking without translating in our heads?
That's where A.J. Hoagie comes in. One of our sources outlines his technique for thinking in English.
Now, thinking in English sounds like the Holy Grail, but Hoagie actually makes it very practical.
He does. He suggests starting with high-frequency vocabulary. Don't try to sound hyper-educated or advanced at first. Master the simple words.
And he has a specific tool for this, right? The mini-stories.
Yes, mini-stories and specifically point-of-view stories.
I thought this concept was absolutely brilliant. Can you explain how the point-of-view stories work for the listener?
It's elegantly simple. You take a very basic story, maybe just 3 or 4 sentences long. For example, the boy walks to the store. He buys milk.
Okay, super simple.
You listen to that until you understand it absolutely perfectly without any effort. Then you listen to the exact same story, but shift it in time.
Ah, so changing the tense.
Right. So you listen to, yesterday the boy walked to the store. He bought milk.
So instead of memorizing the rigid rule ed for the past tense, you are just hearing the pattern shift naturally in context.
Exactly. You aren't analyzing the grammar at all. You are experiencing the time shift. Over time, you start to feel the past tense rather than calculating it mathematically.
And that feeling is the beginning of thinking in English.
Precisely.
Okay, so that handles the mental side of the equation, but what about the physical side? Because sometimes, even if my brain completely knows the word, my mouth just feels clumsy.
Like it trips over itself.
Yes. It's like my tongue doesn't quite know where to go, especially when I'm trying to speak clearly.
That is a physical coordination issue, not a mental one. We often forget that speaking a language is a deeply physical act.
Your tongue, your lips, your jaw.
They are all muscles, and they need muscle memory. And for that, our sources recommend shadowing.
Shadowing. I've heard this term thrown around a lot online. Is it really just repeating after a recording?
It's much more intense than just lazy repetition. It's active, precise mimicry. Think of it as a highly targeted gym workout for your mouth.
Our source actually outlines a very specific 7-step process for this.
Yes, let's walk through it. First, you have to choose a speaker with a clear accent.
Right, so deciding if you want to sound British, American, Australian, whatever.
Exactly. You pick your target. Then, step 2, you put on headphones and you listen actively.
Just focusing on the rhythm and the pacing.
Right. Step 3 is where the real work begins. You repeat what they say a split second after they say it.
So you're essentially a living echo.
An echo with a lot of attitude. You have to mimic absolutely everything.
Their speed, their pauses.
Their emotion. If the speaker sounds angry, you sound angry. If they whisper, you whisper. You are trying to match their physical rhythm perfectly.
And the source mentions recording yourself doing this, which honestly sounds absolutely painful.
Oh, it is painful.
Yeah.
Nobody likes the sound of their own recorded voice.
No one.
But it is essential feedback. Step 5 is the comparison. You record your shadow session, and then you force yourself to listen to it side by side with the original audio.
And that gap, that slight difference between your rhythm and their rhythm.
That is exactly where the work is. That's how you fix your accent.
It really connects back to our core theme of clarity and deliberate speech. If you purposefully shadow a clear, paused speaker, you naturally start to adopt their cadence.
Exactly. You stop rushing. It forces you to slow down and articulate your words.
Okay, this is a perfect segue into the next major hurdle. Let's talk about the plateau.
Every learner's favorite topic.
We've all been there. You reach a point where you're fairly communicative, you can comfortably order a coffee, maybe have a decent chat with a colleague, but you keep making the exact same structural mistakes over and over again.
There you go. She have.
Yes. You intellectually know it's wrong, but you simply can't stop saying it in the moment. The sources call this fossilization.
And this is where we actually have to flip the script a bit. We've spent this whole time talking about acquisition and flow and relaxing.
Right.
But to break fossilization, we actually need to go back to learning. We need what Jane Birkenhead calls deliberate practice.
How is deliberate practice different from just, practicing?
She makes a brilliant distinction between unfocused practice and deliberate practice. Unfocused practice is chatting with an English tutor on Zoom for an hour.
Which is fun. It keeps you fluent.
It is fun, but if you've been saying he go for 5 straight years, casually chatting isn't going to fix it. Your tutor almost certainly understands you, so they don't bother correcting you every single time.
So what does deliberate practice actually look like, practically speaking?
It looks like highly targeted drilling. It is zooming in on that one specific fossilized error. Let's stick with the third-person S as an example.
Okay.
Deliberate practice is sitting down and spending 15 unbroken minutes doing nothing but saying sentences like, he walks, she runs, it works.
Out loud.
Out loud.
Oh.
You record it, you listen, you repeat it in isolation, and then you repeat it in context.
So the goal isn't communication in that moment.
Not at all.
It's literally about rewriting a deeply ingrained neural pathway.
Exactly. 20 minutes of that highly focused, admittedly boring work is worth far more than 5 hours of general conversation if your goal is to fix a fossilized error.
And to make sure those difficult corrections actually stick in the brain, we have to talk about memory. Because there is honestly nothing worse than learning a new word or correcting a rule today and completely forgetting it by Friday.
Which brings us to the forgetting curve.
By Hermann Ebbinghaus, right?
Yes. He proved this phenomenon over a century ago. Human beings forget information exponentially. If you don't actively review something, it essentially vanishes.
So the modern solution to this, according to our research, is SRS.
Spaced repetition systems.
Like the apps Anki or Quizlet.
Right. These systems are specifically designed to hack that forgetting curve. They use an algorithm to show you a flashcard right at the exact mathematical moment you are about to forget it.
So if I know the word apple perfectly, the algorithm won't show it to me for a year.
Exactly.
But if I keep messing up a really difficult word, like, I don't know, ubiquitous, I'll see it again tomorrow.
Correct. It's an efficiency algorithm for your brain. It ensures you aren't wasting your precious study time reviewing what you already know.
And there's a great tip from our sources about this. We need to make those digital flashcards brain-friendly.
Yes, don't just write the English word on the front and the translation on the back. That is way too dry.
So add images.
Add vivid images, add native audio clips, write funny or weird example sentences. You want to give your brain as many distinct hooks as possible to hang that memory on.
Awesome. All right, as we get closer to the end here, I want to circle back to the very beginning to wrap this all up. We've covered a ton of mechanics today.
We really have. Input, reading strategies, shadowing, SRS.
But there is this overarching psychological layer to all of this that Stephen Krashen talks about. And honestly, it feels like the single most important piece of the puzzle.
Ah, the affective filter.
Yes. This seems to be the real game changer.
It is. The affective filter is basically an invisible mental block that is caused by negative emotions. If you're anxious, if you're bored, or if you're feeling defensive, the filter goes up.
And when the filter is up?
Input is completely blocked. It literally doesn't matter if you have the absolute perfect I+1 podcast. It doesn't matter if you are sitting in a room with the greatest English teacher on the planet. If you are stressed out about making mistakes, or if you are bored to tears by the textbook, that input hits your ears, but it simply does not reach the language acquisition device inside your brain.
So when teachers say relax, it's not just them saying, hey, be cool.
No, it's a strict biological requirement for learning.
That is fascinating.
A low-anxiety environment is absolutely essential. This is exactly why those strict, scary, test-heavy classrooms often produce students who can pass a written exam with flying colors, but absolutely cannot speak a word.
Because their affective filter was hiked up the entire semester.
Exactly.
This connects so deeply to motivation, too. The sources make a big distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
Right. Extrinsic motivation is, I need to pass this English proficiency test to get a job.
Which inherently creates pressure.
And pressure raises the filter. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is, I actually really enjoy this fantasy novel, or I really want to be able to talk to this specific person.
And that genuine interest lowers the filter.
Exactly. It opens the pathways.
So practically speaking for the listener, if you are currently reading a book that you absolutely hate, just because someone told you it's good for your English vocabulary, stop.
Burn the book. Throw it away. Find something you actually love reading. The pleasure you get from the material isn't just a nice bonus. It is the fundamental mechanism that allows acquisition to happen in the first place.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's bring this all together. The roadmap for achieving that clear, paused, deliberate English seems to be this. Stop trying to consciously learn the rules all the time.
Bypass the monitor.
Flood your brain with comprehensible input, instead aiming for that sweet spot of 95% understanding.
Respect the silent period. Don't rush output.
Right, but when you do want to speak, use active shadowing to build the physical muscle memory for clarity.
And above all else, keep the anxiety low. Enjoy the process.
It really is a massive paradigm shift from speed to clarity. We are so often obsessed with learning as fast as possible that we completely forget to learn deep.
Deep and clear always wins the race.
And this leaves us with a really provocative question to chew on as we close out. We naturally assume that to be a good speaker, we need to be talking constantly.
We feel guilty if we aren't practicing speaking.
Exactly. But if the research we reviewed today is right, and speaking ability is truly just the natural result of what we've successfully understood over time,
then maybe the most productive thing you can do for your spoken English today isn't to force a stressful conversation at all.
maybe the absolute best thing you can do is just put on your headphones, find a story you actually care about, close your eyes, and just listen.
Let your brain do exactly what it was biologically designed to do.
A deeply comforting thought for anyone out there feeling the pressure to perform. Well, that's it for today's deep dive into the science of learning. We really hope this gives you a completely new lens on your own journey toward clear, confident English.
Keep enjoying the input, everyone. Happy acquiring.
We'll see you next time.